wanted to take a liner to Greece and go to Greece and all this stuff. And I was a 10-year-old child. So I was sent off to relatives in Denmark. And I had a wonderful summer as well. So I arrived in Copenhagen probably late June, mid to late June, met by my grandmother, who I knew. I was my father's mother. So I was there for 2 months, maybe, and then my grandmother and I flew back to the U.S. There's an emotional connection, yeah, and because I was there, I think when I was fairly young, and my grandmother was able to point out things from her childhood, and then my uncle, my grandmother's other son, put together, took a lot of family albums and annotated them and wrote down stories that his mother had told him, and so on. So I can look at these photographs and say, oh yeah, I've been there, and I can imagine having been there, and I know the people that were in this picture. Here's my grandmother and her siblings when they were young here, and I knew them when they were older. I can see the continuity of time. We actually stopped somewhere, like either Greenland or Iceland, for refueling, I guess. Because I have a picture of this, and I remember we stopped for an hour or two at this place en route, in this very remote thing that in my head is pretty clearly either Greenland or Iceland. And so I have a picture of me, not of me, that I took of the little terminal building surrounded by desolation on, the tarmac, which you wouldn't get anymore. But yeah, so I was put on the plane by my parents in San Francisco and landed in Copenhagen sometime later. Oh, no, I remember, kind of a lot of corridors and well, where do I go now? Well, I'll just follow everybody else. So That's what I did. And I'm not sure I had checked baggage because I had a very small suitcase that might have just been carry-on. So I just followed everybody else and went through immigration and customs and immigration. And there my Danish family was waiting for me. And my grandmother was there, so I knew her. The other people I had not met. I mean, nobody told me to wait for anybody. I was a relatively biddable child, so if somebody said, "No, just wait until everybody's off and we'll walk," I would have done that. But yeah, so I just figured out it was time to go. And I remember this being not actually a huge greeting area. It was relatively small, like a narrow corridor. So they might have managed to inveigle their way past something to get to me right after customs. But yeah, so there's my grandmother, and then my aunt Inger, and then her two kids, Lena and Per. And Per's the younger son, so he was about 8, and he thrust this bouquet of orange roses at me with kind of a scowl on his face. And so that was my welcome to Copenhagen, which was wonderful. It was the WorldCon, and I believe it was called, so WorldCon is kind of the umbrella name, but every year it changes its name to reflect the regional convention. So I'm pretty sure that one was called LunCon, LONCON, and I think it was LunCon 2. At that time, WorldCons were much smaller, and especially foreign ones, because it's really still pretty U.S.-centric. And I suspect I was sent off in June, and late June after school was out, and then they probably shortly thereafter flew to New York and caught a liner that took them to Greece. So yeah, it was kind of a transitional time, and sort of a testing of independence, and which I think I passed reasonably well, and had a great summer. So somehow I got from New York to Washington, D.C., and I don't remember how that happened. I might have been on a train. Because then my other grandmother, my mother's mother, I stayed with her for maybe a week in Washington, D.C., and got to go to the Smithsonian. So then I am 90% sure that she put me on a bus. By now I'm 11, but she put me on a bus to Minneapolis. So then my other grandmother, met me in Minneapolis, and we went to Northfield. She had to take care of some business there, and then we drove from Northfield back to California, connecting to a broader family than my nuclear family, and really making lifelong connections with a wider circle of family that I still have. I think my grandmother Astrid was really the key player. She emigrated when she was about 22, I think, and always maintained a close relationship with her family, her parents while they were still alive, writing and visits. Even then, when it was much more of a complicated deal to travel to Europe, in the 1930s, she went a couple of times back to Denmark, and she was really the bridge, because there was kind of a family rift between two groups, but she loved everybody and kept everybody. She would see everybody when she was there, and so kind of kept communication lines open with that whole bunch of folks, and so she just maintained that during her life. And then my cousin, who lives in the Netherlands, also has, because she was raised in Ohio, so this is my father's brother's daughter, youngest daughter. Living in the Netherlands, I think, it's not that far to go to visit Denmark, so she's in touch with our mutual cousin Lena, and the rest of the family over there as well. She can pop over for a weekend practically. So walk the streets, and it's the same streets that have been there for 500 years, more than 100, which in the West it's hard to find things that are more than 100 years old. But you go to Europe, and it's like, even the East Coast has more and more of this going on than we do here. It's just standing at on the ramparts of Kronborg Castle, looking over to Sweden. So much history. And even the landscape, the hand of man is all over the European landscape. Out here, there's some vast swaths, really vast swaths, that have had nothing done to them.